Hello and welcome everyone back to Ruslan Bortnik YouTube channel where we analyze the situation in Ukraine and give you pragmatic and rational analysis in terms of what is going on, what is happening, and what should we know about the situation and how things are developing. I'm excited again to be here with my colleague Ruslan Bortnik, the director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics. Ruslan, it's great to see you again.
Hello, James. It's a pleasure for me.
I would like to start today with the interview or the conversation that Donald Trump had about why he haven't been in Turkey, about his busy schedule, what was going on, why Putin haven't showed up to the negotiations in Turkey. If we may start with the video and then provide an analysis to what was happening there.
Okay.
Hard for me to say. I'm not doing it.
On the substance, what do you think's going through Putin's mind? You said get to the table. You said stop bombing. He hasn't stopped bombing. He's not at the table. And what do you think is happening?
Well, he is at the table, and he wanted this meeting. And I always felt there can't be a meeting without me because I don't think a deal is going to get through. There's a lot of hatred on both sides. I have a very good relationship with Putin. I think we'll make a deal. We have to get together, and I think we'll probably schedule it because I'm tired of having other people go and meet and everything else. And with that being said, I think Steve Witkoff has done an incredible job. But it's a very tough job, and it's a job that, because of position, that I think I'm the only one that's going to be able to do that one. And I think we'll do it fast, too. I think Putin is tired of this whole thing. He's not looking good, and he wants to look good. Don't forget, this was supposed to end in 1 week. And if he didn't get stuck in the mud with his army tanks all over the place, they would have been in Kiev in about 5 hours. And who gave the javelins? Do you remember who gave the javelins? Was it Barack Hussein Obama? No, it was Donald Trump gave the javelins.
Do you think your perception of it has changed? Is Putin now the obstacle to peace in your mind?
Look, I had a real rough session with Zelensky because I didn't like what he said. And he was not making it easy. And I always said he doesn't have the cards. And he doesn't have the cards. And, I'm being honest. He doesn't have the cards. You're dealing with a massive army, and you're dealing with somebody that's brave, that had great equipment.
But I haven't seen you get personal. On Truth Social, you said, Vladimir, stop. He hasn't stopped. And you had once said that maybe you need to look at other things like sanctions or banking.
Okay, so
because maybe they need to be pressured in a different way.
And I'll be doing that if
do you think that
I don't want to see 5,000 people. Outside of the money, which is a big deal, but the money is the money. The money we can make up. I can make up the money on one trip like this. Okay, I mean, think of it.
I think we picked up the context. What is Trump trying to say? And in my perspective, he's going on again backwards, saying that Putin wants to have negotiation. He wants to have negotiation. Everybody wants to negotiate a ceasefire or a peaceful deal, and nobody's looking good because that war continues. But that being said, Ruslan, why haven't then they have met in Turkey? If everybody's not looking good for continuing the war and everyone wants to stop and everyone wants to have a peaceful resolution, why Trump haven't showed up at the end at Turkey? But he said he could. He haven't said that he will, but he said that he could. The negotiation was in general initiated from the Russian side. Why haven't they made this happen now? But instead, from Trump, we're hearing, well, we will later. And this trend of we will later, we want to, we need to, in a week, in 24 hours, in a month, it has to stop, and so on and so forth. But they haven't yet met.
You're making an excellent scope of questions, and I will try to make a short answers. And so if it will not be enough, please push me again
of course. Yep.
to the right direction. In general, of course, everybody is ready to talk, is ready to look like a peacemaker, negotiators, and so on.
Because it's popular nowadays.
It's very popular inside of Ukraine and Russia. The majority of Ukrainians and Russians are willing to stop this war. It's very popular in the eyes of other world, not only in the face of United States and Trump, but also in the face of China and other countries. It's very popular. But at the same time, no one is ready to go to the deep concessions toward each others. No one is ready to change, to trade their main interests. That's all for nowadays. So we have like imitations of negotiation when the sides are sitting together, shaking hands, and talking very brilliant words, even making some humanitarian steps like a change in prison people, or talking about the future of kids. But no one is ready to stop. No one is ready to make some steps back of state of the position of stated principal goals. I said you before many times that without United States intervention to this situation, there will not be a clear chance to success. Only United States presence in negotiation. Personally, and not only a presence like a mediator, but also presence like a participant with signing agreement, with taking responsibilities and obtaining rights, of course, at the same
time. And basically,
time.
This is what Trump is saying, that without him personally being part of that process, things won't finalize.
Yeah,
is that signaling to us that he understood that without his personal and the United States participation in a potential peaceful agreement or a ceasefire agreement, it wouldn't happen?
I think this is the main achievement of Istanbul talks. It's a recognition from the Trump side the necessity of United States participation in this dialogue. Trump clearly said a few times, and Rubio also repeated these words, without us will not happen. And so we have to take part in it. So the main achievement of negotiation between Ukraine and Russia, it's a United States recognition their necessity to straight dialogue agreement with Russia. And maybe it was prepared before. Maybe this stage of negotiation in Istanbul was very necessary only to show us of inability side of the sides, Ukraine and Russia, to achieve a common result without this intervention. Maybe it will be like a very important but political show. Maybe it was a last stage before which underlines the significant, extremely necessity of straight negotiation and maybe straight agreement between Russia and United States. And of course, we have also tactical achievements, direct talk, the peace like a main goal of negotiation. We have a lot of tactical achievements, but the main achievement in this situation was the rebuilding, reframing of these peaceful talks between the sides.
It looks that we have some progress, like you've mentioned, from the perspective that the United States recognizes, by Marco Rubio saying it, Trump's saying it by himself, that they understand that without them personally and the United States as a participant being part of these negotiations, things won't move forward. Obviously, the Russian side, they've been always saying, we just want to have direct conversation with the United States to resolve all the conflicts and all the complexity that we have built up, not just on the Ukrainian direction, but in general between the United States and the Russian relationship. So if they come to realize all that, and if they've done so much progress, and the population and the nations and the countries and the leaders of the countries are all ready to accept peace, they all want to see peace, they all want to see a ceasefire in some way or another, why then what's stopping them? What's the last piece that is stopping the leaders from the meeting? What is stopping the countries from structurizing that systematic, peaceful resolution that will work for all the sides? Of course, it cannot be perfect because everybody will have to compromise on something and not everybody's going to get what they want to get. But what is holding them back from finally making that last move in terms of meeting, in terms of taking participation, in terms of drafting that paper that will work for everybody? What is that final piece that is missing here from that final resolution, or at least the beginning of a conversation about the final resolution?
The main reasons of existence of such an opposition or even confrontation approach towards the peace negotiation, it's the name of this peace. If this peace will happen, it will be American-Russian peace, not European, not Ukrainian. It will be American-Russian peace, and the United States and Russia may be main beneficiaries of this agreement, of this peace. So Europe is clearly understands it. So Europe is trying to avoid the situation when the main agreements will be achieved without the participation of Europe. Ukraine is in the same situation. And of course, Trump is saying that Ukrainian president hasn't cards. In other words, it means Zelensky is not a player. Zelensky needs to fulfill our agreement, our orders, United States orders. He is not a player. He hasn't card. In other words, it's very rude, but it's real. So, from United States perspective, so it will be Russian, United States, peace and world, but Europe wants to achieve the European world, not only peace. Ukraine wants to achieve the Ukrainian peace and world, and now we see a huge geopolitical championship of the different sides on the topic who will be able to provide and to construct their own model of future settlement in this war. And of course, when Europe or Ukraine are without this process of the highest negotiation, they are trying to put a stick in the wheel. They are trying to make some obstacles. They are trying to state additional reasons,
Yes.
ultimatums, and so on. They are trying to do everything to take into attention of United States and to do everything which leads them to take in account their interests in this negotiation table.
Basically, they're sabotaging the process to implement their own interest and their own points that they want to be considered.
To be honest, we need to understand that this peace is it's not very hard to achieve for United States and Russia, even because this war is going on mostly in Ukrainian lands. Ukrainians are suffering a lot, the mostly suffering this situation. For United States, it's like an agreement. It's words and texts and so on.
They're not connected to it feeling-wise.
Yeah, it doesn't influence very seriously in American society. Maybe at all. For Russia, of course, it influences, but not crucial also.
But it's still not on the Russian land.
But Ukrainians' disagreement would be existential. It will rebuild the country absolutely.
Speaking of a systematic approach, if we can pull up Keith Kalog and his team, they came up with a piece of a document that does provide a little bit of a systematic structure in terms of how this potential peace agreement can look like. And they have divided into a few blocks, 22 points. Yeah. And if we can go block by block and discuss these points, how realistic they are, how productive they are, and what can be achieved and what cannot. So I can see them shared on the screen right now. Permanent ceasefire, cessation of hostilities. So the first, if you can scroll a little bit lower, so that's the first block. The first block has 6 points. First point is both sides agree that a permanent cessation of all hostilities will begin immediately from the current line of control and will remain in effect until the final exchange of territories. A 30-kilometer demilitarized buffer zone shall be established between the forces of the parties, which shall be monitored by a joint coordination commission. So the challenge that I see here is that 30 kilometers sometimes will cross the line of cities. Like in the southeast of Ukraine, we have a city, Kherson, that will potentially get into this buffered zone. How they can resolve that, or how will this 30-kilometer function basically?
I will show also an additional map. We discussed, I don't remember, maybe we discussed it earlier. It's Kalog map. It's about this 30-kilometer zone, because 80 miles, it's near 30 kilometers. And you can see this map. It was published by the Kalog team. And of course, it's very hard to achieve such a deflection between dividing the sides, because not only question of the cities which now are the lands of the battlefields, for example, Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, or Volchansk, but also if we will realize, if we will fulfill this demilitarization zone, it means that, for example, Kherson city will be also without Ukrainian troops. And Donetsk partially also will be. A lot of cities which are under the control of the sides will be without presence of militaries, and it's very hard to accept for both sides. In such cities like Zaporizhia could be in such a zone in the future, because battlefield is very changeable now. Russian offensive operation is going on. I think it's an ideal situation. Moreover, there is no clear instrument of monitoring of this situation. Kalog proposed to make a joint coordination commission for monitoring this situation. We had this situation earlier during the Minsk agreement 2014-2022, when we have also a special monitoring mission of OSCE, but it
haven't showed a lot of success,
and it hadn't helped us to avoid the war. But in this situation, no one international organization or country is going on to make this monitoring mission. And if this monitoring mission will be consisted only from the representatives of the sides, it will be very hard to maintain and to work this mission. And I think it's not very real situation. And to just make such a depletion of the sides by the battlefield, it's much.
So we can say that point is problematic, and it wouldn't function as they're planning it to function. So that will make specifically this part
it's
complex.
Very idealistic point of view on the situation, very theoretical, very
wishful thinking.
Yes.
The second point is both sides shall immediately begin technical negotiations facilitated by the United States. I think that shouldn't be a big challenge. Third point, both sides agree to an immediate and permanent cessation of all hostilities in all domains. Air, land, and sea and infrastructure. Again, this is more technical. I would say that this is something that can be negotiable. Fourth point, third countries facilitating the process with the US support will develop and implement a monitoring and verification mechanism to ensure that both sides fully complying with the complete cessation of hostilities. So that's, again, going back to the first point, that's the complexity, that it's a lot of responsibility, and it's going to be hard to find that country or organization that will ensure that will happen. Russia will return all deported Ukrainian children and civilian prisoners, and both sides will agree to an all-for-all prisoner exchange. What do you think about the fifth point? If I remember correctly, the Russian President Vladimir Putin was actually accused and was by the international law, how would you call it? I forgot that statement. But basically, Russian president is proven to be guilty for kidnapping the Ukrainian children from Ukraine. Those are one of the points that the international court is trying to pursue in his corner. And the exchange for all. This is something that was brought up multiple times. Why the exchange all for all is never happening? To my understanding, Russian side is the one that is blocking that exchange all for all because they apparently hold more hostages and more prisoners versus Ukraine. So it's always a number, 1,000 for 1,000, 500 for 500. And the Ukrainian kids, of course, why they haven't been returned yet home? Why are they being held hostage? And what are the chances that Russia will go for it and exchange all for all and return the Ukrainian kids back home?
It's also a very complicated question. Or partially you answered for the question of changing all for all. It's a problem of number because Russia has in 8 or maybe in 10 times more Ukrainian soldiers and officers than Ukraine has. And it's not beneficial for Russia to give back all Ukrainian soldiers and officers. Many of them will be back
in the army. That's the concern.
To the army, and like it happened, for example, with leadership of Azov, which that people were captured in Mariupol. Then they sent it to Turkey, and then they came back to Ukraine, and now they are in the army again. Very professional people, and it's a problem of number. And so Russia is ready to make such a change, but in equal number. And both sides agreed in Istanbul to change 1,000 by 1,000 prisoners, military prisoners. Talking about kids, it's even much harder. If we are talking about that. Kids which have relatives, there is no problem at all. For example, if the kid has parents, they move these parents to Europe, to Ukraine. It's not a big problem. It's not a big problem. We are talking about the kids of which was under the
country's custody.
No, under the state's help. It's kids without, which in the beginning of the war, these kids with a special kids houses under the
state's custody.
Yeah, maybe I don't know this word.
And it's like when the child doesn't have parents, so like they can be under state's custody, or like somebody else can take custody of the child.
And of course, Russia captured these lands, said that these kids belongs to the lands, to the institutions which when they were. And Russia gathered these kids to more safer lands inside of Russian territory. And
they have relocated them from the borderline deeper into Russia.
Yeah, and the question about kids is a question about these kids which are without relatives. And this is the problem. If the kid has relatives, even now we are able to bring back some Ukrainian kids if the relatives are ready to fight for them, to go through the special procedure with the International Red Cross and so on, so on. It's possible, but it's impossible if there are no relatives.
Security guarantees before we go, last point. After Russia implements peace agreement, the US will support the resumption of the work of NATO-Russia Council for Dialogue on Mutual Security Issues in the region. I think this is a pro-Russian point, something that Russia...
I don't think so. Russia is not demanding to make such a council. It's an empty point.
Neutral.
There is no Russia has a lot of dialogue with the West. One more council without a special obligation, terms, and so on. It
doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're going to move to security guarantees for Ukraine. Number 7, Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees, which will be provided by a specially created ADHOC group of European countries and willing non-European states that will invest in Ukraine's long-term security and deterrence capabilities. So this is a pro-Ukrainian point. This is something that Ukraine is pushing.
It's also without American presence. Look at this point.
It
Without
sounds like
American,
whoever wants to volunteer.
it's a European problem. It's European problem and the problem of the willing countries.
8, the US will not support Ukraine's NATO bid. This is something that Trump's administration have announced when they came into power, and this is something that is very, very important for the Russian side, which makes sense that that has to be part of the negotiation. Is there something that we have to add in terms of the Ukrainian NATO future, or this? We've discussed this just like multiple times, so I don't want to repeat previous statements. What do you think?
I think this point is taken off the table, and it's not working point. But of course, Russia demands some official statements on it from the NATO side and also from Ukrainian side. For Ukraine, it's much harder because this point was very important part of state propaganda and political propaganda all last 10 years.
In Ukraine, yeah.
Yeah, and moreover, this point is in Ukrainian constitution also. So Russia demanding taking off this from Ukrainian constitutions and to make official statements from the NATO that NATO will not accept Ukraine in the future.
Number 9, there will be no restrictions on the side of Ukraine defense forces. So this is complicated because in the Istanbul, when they just started the negotiations in 2023 or the end of 2022, Russia has demanded to limit Ukrainian army, to limit Ukrainian forces. And that point is diminishing their demand by saying we cannot put any restrictions on the sides of Ukrainian defense forces. How livable that point is. Will Russia accept it? And what was happening during the negotiation that they have held on the 15th of May? Have Russia demanded again to limit Ukrainian army, or this is off the table?
Russia demanded all the points of the Istanbul 1-0, which was finished in April 2022, the last negotiation that sides held. And this point is also a very important achievement of the Russian side. In 2022, sides agreed to some restrictions for Ukrainian army and decreasing the number of Ukrainian army. Now, Ukrainian army is more than 1 million person. You need to understand, in Istanbul in 2022, Ukraine insisted that Ukrainian army should be 250,000 person. Russian side demanded that it may be not bigger than 80,000 of. Of course, there was big differences between the position, but both countries agreed the direction to the decreasing the number of Ukrainian army. So I think there is a possibility to find a common solution on it. But in these suggestions of the Kalog, who is a good policeman for Ukraine and Europe, who is very pro-Ukrainian.
He's presenting the pro-Ukrainian side.
He's presenting pro-Ukrainian, pro-European side in the United States. There is no restrictions for Ukrainian defense force. But we need to understand that the size of Ukrainian army strictly depend on the ability of Ukrainian economy. And without Western support, Ukraine is not able to keep a big army from the point of money. And
so it will have to be shrinked anyways, depending on the financial situation in Ukraine. The last point is that Ukraine may continue to move towards EU membership in accordance with full compliance with anti-corruption reforms. So anti-corruption reforms, it's probably a European point. They're always trying to fight with the Ukrainian corruption inside Ukraine before Ukraine will join the EU. But I also think that on the Russian side, Russia is not against Ukraine joining EU. That wasn't an obstacle.
Yeah, because Russia is willing to use Ukrainian economy and lands like a transfer zone to have entrance to European economy also. I think this point is very important for Ukraine. It's a good, it may be a good political compensation for Ukraine in situation of concessions toward the United States and Russia to achieve the peace agreement. So it's quite possible. The member in the European Union, it's a political decision of European countries many of them are very dependent on the United States position. So United States is very influential on this future Europe Union perspectives of Ukraine.
In terms of the territory, the final block, U.S. will recognize Russia's control over Crimea. Recognition by Ukraine is not required. Obviously, Ukraine is going to view it as a negative thing, but again, Ukraine is not required to recognize Russian control over Crimea.
But Russia demands from Ukraine, demanded it in the last Istanbul talks to recognize Russian status of occupied territories.
So they'll have to meet somewhere in the middle between not asking Ukraine to recognize and just...
United States recognition, I think, will be enough for Russia to accept this peace deal.
They'll be able to compromise.
Yeah.
12, same story about recognizing Russian control, just recognizing Russian control. They're not recognizing it as part of Russia. So there is a different...
It's a Baltic scenario. You remember the United States never recognized the Soviet status of Baltic countries. But at the same time, they hadn't
continued business as usual.
Hadn't made any sanctions, or it hadn't influence in relations between the United States and Russia. That point 12, 13, it's about it.
So 11, 12, 13, it's all in the same package about the territory. 14, Ukraine restores control over the territory of Kharkiv region. I think it's important to mention because it's not very popular, but Russia does control a certain part of the border inside Kharkiv. So there will be some exchange, so Ukraine can control in the full.
But now it's also a problem because Russia stated a question in last Istanbul also about the buffer zone on the Ukrainian-Russian border. Russia demanded from Ukraine to leave for 20, 30 kilometers territory from the borders.
And that's a new demand. That's a new demand that we haven't seen in the Istanbul one.
It suits to Kharkivska Oblast, which Russia is controlling near for 15%, and it suits also for Sumska Oblast and Chernigivska Oblast.
Russia will restore control over the territory of the Kursk region. Well, that's too late. I think they're almost took control over back.
Ukraine is not controlling any one of settlements in the territory of Kursk region. Maybe Ukraine is controlling some
on
fields.
The border, but it's not significant.
But too late,
Both sides agreed to establish a permanent 30-kilometer demilitarized buffer zone. We've seen that before on the map that you have showed earlier. We have covered that. Number 17, Ukraine will restore control over Zaporizhia nuclear power plant with U.S. monitoring and management of the plant with electricity distributed between both sides. And Ukraine will restore control over the Kakhovka Dam. I've seen some argument in regards to that point. Russia wasn't eager to give up on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. What is the situation in terms of today? Like, what can be the compromise?
Russia is not ready to give back the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to
But
Ukraine.
I think they have said that they're okay with providing electricity to the Ukrainian cities that depend.
And moreover, Russia is ready to sell electricity, and moreover, Russia is ready even to accept some kind of United States monitoring mission in this nuclear power plant. But I have feeling that maybe Russia could trade this question because the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is extremely important for Ukraine. It's 20% of Ukrainian electricity
in the whole country supply.
And it's very important also for United States because if United States is going to fulfill the mineral deal with Ukraine, it needs
that electricity,
huge amount of electricity. And so I think I have a feeling that Russia could trade it for something very important. For example, for restoration Russian energy transit to Europe, we are talking about the Nord Streams, we are talking about other pipelines and so on.
So it's tradable.
It's tradable, I think, because Russia is not, there is no strong necessity from Russian side to keep over control on this nuclear power plant, but Russia needs for occupied territory electricity from this station, of course.
So we're moving into a final block economy. The US and Ukraine shall implement agreement on the economic cooperation mineral resources, which they have done. Is that finalized, or are there any other steps that need to be completed before that agreement is fully?
Ukrainian president last week signed the special law, but at the same time, we need to make many amendments to different Ukrainian laws, codes, and so on. I think it will take some more times for a few months to really fulfill the law,
The agreement.
law and agreement in Ukrainian field.
Point number 20, sanctions imposed by the US on Russia since 2014 will be lifted after a final peaceful settlement is reached. In the event of violation of the terms of the peaceful agreement, all sanctions will be reimposed through snapback mechanism. Okay, so that's a very interesting one, and I want to open a discussion over that point because that really deserves a lot of attention. In terms of sanctions, from one side, I've heard Russia saying, oh, the sanctions are painful, but we have changed our economy. We have developed new economical ties with our allies. We have adapted our economy to sanctions. We're functioning. We're well. We didn't like them, but we're fine. This is the first part. The second part is that the US doesn't have a lot of economical impact on Russian economy as is. Most of the sanctions that were hurtful to Russia were implemented by the European countries. So it wouldn't change a whole lot if US is lifting the sanctions except something symbolic, because mostly Russia was hurt by the European sanctions. So what is really your perspective over that situation when from one hand the US sanctions on Russia are not very impactable? From other perspective, Russia is on one hand saying we're okay, we adapted. On the other, no, we still demand you to lift them. Like, is it a symbolic demand, or they're actually hurt economically by the sanctions and they're just trying to use their propaganda for internal use that we have adapted, but they actually haven't, and the economy is suffering? What is really happening? If we can dive into that point really well to break it down, because it's really fascinating what's happening around sanctions, how impactable they are or they aren't. Maybe they're symbolic. What is standing behind all this sanction thing? And as another point that I'll just drop into that statement before we move forward, and I'll pass you the word. European Union, while Russian team and the Ukrainian team have met in Istanbul for negotiation, European have imposed or said that they will impose another package of sanctions. So from one perspective, we're trying to see a peaceful resolution. We're trying to have a negotiations over ceasefire. From the other side, we see that the Europeans are actually increasing the stakes of the war by implementing more sanctions.
Yeah, moreover, it may be the biggest package of sanctions from European Union for all the time
since the beginning of the war.
Yeah, they call them health sanctions. It's also a part of political game of European Union against Russia and against United States also to push them to invite European Union to the table of the negotiation. But answering for your question, I think it's very weak from Russian point of view because you're right that Russian-United States economical relation weren't very big, and it's not enough for Russia just lifting sanctions from United States side, and Russia is demanding from United States also to find an agreement to push European Union to do the same thing. Moreover, this structure of lifting the sanction is also very weak from Russian side because who knows when the final peaceful settlement will be reached? Who will measure it? Who will evaluate it? How it will be evaluated? Every time there will be a possibility to say you haven't fulfilled everything we said. So it's very, I think from Russian side point, it's very unclear, not with any concrete things point, and Russia will not accept only this lifting of sanctions. Russia may accept this model only in this situation if it will be some kind of first symbolic or a preliminary step, but not like a final regulation.
21. Strengthening economic cooperation between the US and Russia in energy and other industries will continue, provided that Russia complies with the terms of the settlement. I think that's... Yeah.
It's also a question about the mineral deal, but between United States and Russia. It's also a question about the future energy cooperation between the United States and Russia. Maybe you heard, and there are some rumors and some publication in mass media that United States businessmen are looking to buy the European part of Nord Stream.
Yes.
And looking for another energy projects of Russia. And the United States is looking the ability to take over the control of Russian energy transit. I think this is a very descriptive point about it. James?
Yep, just technical issues. I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
Last point, Ukraine will be fully restored and receive financial compensation, particularly through the use of Russian sovereign assets, which will remain frozen until Russia compensates Ukraine for the losses incurred. I think it's a negotiable point.
It's a negotiable point, but if you are talking about Russian frozen assets, it's near 250 billion United States dollars. It's much less than officially recognized Ukrainian losses, and so it will be not enough. And Russia is declining the possible ability to send to Ukraine all this money. I think this money, Russian frozen assets, could be divided for some parts, like during the negotiation. Some part of this money
will go back to Russia, some will go to compensate Ukraine.
Part will go to Ukraine, yeah.
Okay, now we're going to move to a wider topic, something that has to do with history. After the end of the World War II, the main country that guaranteed peace, stability, and security in Europe was United States. They have created NATO. They have moved their troops inside European countries that became part of NATO. And I think this is a historic movement where now the United States are starting consultation with their allies in regards to NATO to take American troops out of the European countries that are NATO members. Matthew Walker, during his conference about security in Estonia, have mentioned it to Reuters agency. What do we have here, Ruslan? Am I over-exaggerating that that's a historic, symbolic movement, or this is part of an organic process that we see in terms of US is just in general exiting global trends, global movements? What would that mean essentially for Europe? Because the United States basically guaranteed security and defense for the European NATO members, and now they're planning to exit. How this whole thing can play out, because before NATO, before American troops on the European land, Europe had World War I, World War II, endless conflicts between countries that are now part of the European Union, because they have a lot of unresolved conflicts. They kind of like just throw a blind eye on their historical problems and their historical past that they've had together, that they've shared. But if American troops are exiting, can we potentially get into an era where European countries can potentially start fighting again or having some sort of conflicts between themselves inside the European Union, or if the European Union can potentially collapse, what can happen? I'm not even referring to the fact that that will signal to Russia that the European countries, that the European Union, that NATO members are going to become weaker and less of a problem for Russia and Russian army to potentially try and take control over other countries that are closer to the Russian border.
I think it's too early to say that the United States is going on to withdraw from Europe. But I think it's a pressure methods from United States to Europe Union countries in questions, in topics of arguing about the tariffs between United States and European countries, about the money which European countries needs to put to the NATO, to the defense of NATO. You know, this discussion about 5% of GDP each country has to put to the nation, transfer to the NATO.
NATO's budget.
Yes, and also a question about the peaceful settlement on Ukraine and Russia, because the European Union is not helping Trump to find a solution. It making moreover, European countries they make a lot of obstacles in this solution. We discussed a few of them even today. So it's a pressure method, and also it's a way to decrease the United States expenditures, military expenditures in Europe also. Because United States need more resources, military forces in other part of our world, especially in South Asia and other parts, because the main competitor is China, officially recognized. There are a lot of such arguments and reasons why United States is doing so. European Union countries are trying to the defense this position, and this week France President Emmanuel Macron stated that France is ready to share French nuclear umbrella over the Europe, also to send French aircrafts with nuclear rockets to other countries, but that countries also have to pay their own money for such a French defense. And the final decision of the using this weapon will be also on the French side.
French.
Yes, this is a very hard dialogue. We are in the beginning of this dialogue, but I'm sure that if European Union will not go to a significant concessions toward the United States in this question, United States will be gradually decreasing the level of military presence of Europe, and it will provoke in Europe some a very destructive process. We are talking not about Ukrainian-Russian war, but we also talking about the Balkans war. We have a lot of unresolved conflict there. We have also a lot of problem in the south of Europe, for example, Greek-Turkey relations, divided Cyprus. We have a lot of potential military and security problems in Europe. It's a kind of blackmailing from United States, and if Europe will not be ready to pay for United States presence and defense, European Union will face with significant problems.
So if the problem will not be resolved, if they're not going to come to a conclusion how they're going to cooperate in the future, that could be a beginning of a negative trend for the European countries and the European Union. Ruslan, thank you so much for your analysis today, and thank you guys for watching us. If you appreciate our work and if you like our analysis, please subscribe, like, and let us know in the comments so we know that you appreciate the work. Thank you again, and we'll be back with more updates next week.
See you, friends. Thank you.